This is episode number 5, case study, how we get them to stop doing that. All right, let's get this going. Hello. Last week, we got nerdy and talked about the primitive brain versus your thinking brain. Did you make note of 3 times in a day when you did each of these things, when you acted from this part? Great job. If you did, amazing. You are bringing about change in your life. If you didn't do it, that's okay. Now is your chance. All is not lost. You can start now. You go back to listen to that previous episode if you need to, but you can start right now. No need to judge yourself or criticize or shoot, I meant to do it and I didn't. Just start it now. It's okay. We gotcha. We have tons of compassion with your humanness here. You are showing up here. You've showed up today. You are being a change. You're showing up for yourself. You're showing up for your marriage, showing up for your relationship, for your spouse and all their hard work. You are amazing. I have been teaching you a whole bunch of concepts that from the start of this podcast that is bringing us to this point where I'm going to bring forward a case study. Let's apply these things to an actual relationship. It's actually my actual relationship. I'm going to show you a bit how I used this life coaching tools and these techniques and compassion and understanding, how I used the foundation of change, how I used my understanding thinking, understanding how the brain works, how normal human beings work and operate, how I used all of this to actually make a change in my relationship. Because let me tell you, the name of this, Relationships on Fire, that is no accident. I mean, yes, it goes along. It works out very well because I am married to a first responder, a firefighter, right? This is a perspective and a view that I have. But it also, a fire, ouch, it's like burning through your fuel, like it's going to burn out red hot. There's a lot about a fire that is not great. But the other side is it can warm us and it can feed us and keep us safe and light things up, right? There are both sides to a fire. And we want to go from being on that painful side, burning you up side of the fire, to sustaining and warming you. And so I want to show you today how I used this work, how I used life coaching, how I used the tools that I teach you to go from burning up my marriage to having it be a warm, loving, connected space. I've always been in it. I finished the podcast with saying, be committed. That I always had. I was always so committed. And this is what took me through. But I wasn't just committed to having a relationship that felt like it was on fire in not a good way. I was committed to having a connected, warm, nurturing relationship. And that's what I have. Are there moments when it feels like the fiery kind? Of course. I'm a human being. It's okay. But on the whole, it is that warm, glowing fire that I can cook my food over to nurture myself. I feel good around it. It lights up my life, right? It's where I want it to be most of the time. When I pay attention, when I build from my foundation of change, when I keep building the foundation with the fuel that I want, the fuel that takes me to create the marriage and relationship that I want. So let me tell you about this story. I titled this episode, I Wish My Partner Would Stop Doing That. This is came out of last episode of there are things that our partners do that just lights up that primitive brain part of ourself, right? And we just act from that place. Sorry, my brain just acted from a place where I went, oh, I was going to tell you guys, I was going to create some safety to tell you what was going to happen at the end of this podcast right now. And I just forgot about that. So I now remember it. So hang on, back step for just a moment, because at the end, I am going to give you the question that you can use to put into action, right? Step number 3 in the foundation of change is the action piece. So I'm going to give you a question at the end of the podcast that is the most important question I ever asked myself to be able to change how my relationship was showing up for myself, how I was showing up to the relationship, how I was to go from this fiery negative to firing positive relationship. Okay, so you want to hang tight to get that question at the end. And that question is what's going to put you on the path to get your partner to stop doing that thing. We all have a thing, right? I'm sure, in your own head right now, you might even be seeing it like, oh my gosh, my partner would only stop doing that thing, I would feel better. I would show up differently, right? I wouldn't be so aggravated or wouldn't be so terrible if they would just stop doing that thing. And my example that I'm going to give you today is kind of like a pebble in the shoe, right? My thing, it's not a huge thing. It's not really that big of a deal, but it became like a little pebble in my shoe, right? That when you keep walking on it, it just feels more and more painful and is so awful and just like piles up after the miles and miles. It gets so annoying, even though it's just this tiny little thing, right? A tiny little pebble. It just really adds up over time. You have something like this, some little pebble in your shoe, some little thing that your spouse does that just drives you bananas, or is just like so difficult after these miles of it happening in your relationship. Right. So here is my little pebble. Let me tell you about my firefighter. My firefighter likes to groan. Come home from a shift, walk in the kitchen, and groans. Roll over in bed. Can't just like roll over in bed, but like rolls over in bed and groans into position. The kids ask a question. It's met with a groan and an answer, but the groan that comes first. It is the most annoying thing. Yeah, I know, like not a big deal on the scale of all of the bad things that could happen in a relationship, in life, in the world, a groan. Come on, right? Like it's really not that big of a deal. But man, it is like that pebble in the shoe. It is, if they would just stop the groaning, I would feel so much relief. Like sitting down and getting that little pebble out. Oh, it feels so much better. If only the groaning would stop, I could be so much happier. I'd like be able to greet them at the door with like little rainbows and flowers and sweet birds chirping around me like Cinderella, right? Even if the kitchen floor is a mess, so she's like sweeping up and doing all the chores and stuff, but oh, she has those sweet little birds singing around her. If only the groaning there just wasn't met at the door with this groan. I know it is not fair for me to complain about this, right? The work, this 48-hour shift, maybe 72-hour shift coming off of, or maybe it was only a 24-hour shift, but man, I know that they showed up to somebody's worst day, right? The work that was done in that 24 or 48-hour shift was every single person's worst day is what they showed up to. Our kids, they're demanding. They are difficult. Like, I got some not easy kids. They do some stuff. Like, it's grown worthy. And I know, I mean, the sleep cycle, right? Their sleep cycle is so hard. They get interrupted. They get triggered with their fight or flight all the time when those bells and whistles go off. I get it. Okay, groaning when you roll over. Who am I to complain about this little rock? This, my friends, is judgment. This is how I took this little pebble of a groan and used it to judge myself, to judge my spouse, to judge my kids, to judge our relationship. This kind of harkens back to last week's episode with the primitive brain. When I hear the groan, I got reactive from my primitive brain. Sometimes I would fight it and have an anger response and make punchy little comments. Or sometimes I would react to it from a fleeing response and just like, oh, leave the room in exasperation. Or sometimes I'd freeze like a deer in the headlights, quickly running through my head. What can I do? What is making all this groaning? How can I make this groaning stop? After all, this groaning is a sign of a problem in a relationship that can mean the tribe is dissolving. More of the concepts from last week. My reaction to the groan became habitual, so much so that I was acting on the groan before it even happened. I just anticipate that there would be this groan that meant something was wrong. I was doing something wrong. Something was wrong at work. Something was wrong with the kids. I had to try and fix things. I went around, tried to make things easier, tried to ask just the right question to have the space so that my firefighter would process that difficult shift. I would try and make the kids' schedule and do all the things and create that perfect Instagram picture life. The result of all of this became that we were more and more disconnected. I was more disconnected with my partner. I was more disconnected with myself. All this reactive way of being, all of this fuel coming from this primitive brain space, all of this reactiveness, all of these trying to fix things on the action line, on the A line, waiting that foundation of change, just being in the action part. Over time, I became numb to this painful pebble in my shoe, resigned, still walking in a very perfunctory way, carrying out the acts, the duties, the rituals of life together, of a marriage. But there was a numbness there, this disconnection, because it was so painful. This groan had become so painful. This pebble was so painful. I just had to check out. Now, let me tell you the good news. My partner doesn't groan anymore. What? The groaning is gone. Good news. I'm not on that place anymore, right? I kept showing up and bringing in curiosity and inserting these coaching tools that I'm teaching you about, the coaching tools that I bring to online into our membership, right? The coaching tools and support. I got support for myself. And the groaning stopped. Well, at least I don't think there is groaning anymore. And to be really truthful, there could actually be some groaning. Because groaning really, it's just like air coming out of the body, right? And making a sound when it comes out. And I know that myself and my firefighter, that air comes out of our body all the time. And yeah, probably some of the times it makes a sound. The truth is, there may or may not be groaning anymore. But the key here is I've let it go. I didn't judge myself about it. It wasn't critical. I wasn't trying to shove away my thoughts about the groaning. That led to more disconnection. That led to more numbing. The key is I've learned to let it go by using the tools, by bringing in this gentle curiosity, this 10,000-foot view we've been talking about. The 10,000-foot view, let me get clear that there were facts. There were very few facts. One of the facts was when my spouse sat down, air came out and there was a sound. That was it. That's the only fact. I would then make meaning, because this is what humans do. We're meaning-making machines. Normal, right? It's normal. It's okay. I don't have to judge it. I can just notice I made meaning. Just even me calling it a groan versus a sigh or sound. I made meaning. I had lots of stories about the sound, many, many stories about the sound, what the sound meant. This is me starting to build and understand that first corner of the foundation of change. Where am I? Where was I? I was making all these stories up about the sound. So many stories, they just presented as facts to me. I knew what that sound meant. It meant something is wrong, something needs to be fixed. I'm not good enough. They're upset with me. They're upset with the kids. I'm doing something wrong, whatever, right? Lots and lots of stories that I really just thought were kind of like facts, were truth. But there was very little truthful in this situation. There was just sitting down, air coming out, and a sound. The story that I made up, the stories that I made up, this is what gave me the fuel, gave me my feelings, right? We do anything, everything we do in our life is because of how we feel. The feelings that I was creating out of those stories fueled how I acted. I was running around fixing things or leaving or stopping or trying to be perfect or trying to like show up in this compassionate way just to wish or hope that the sound would go away so we would fix it. All of my actions resulted in less love and connection. As I began to use the coaching tools to get these first two steps of the foundation, to not be always just in this action line of doing things, but to really slow down and see the mental steps that were coming in, the mental things that I was doing that was creating the fuel, creating the feeling and driving my actions. I was able to start to see that the groaning wasn't causing my pain. It was the meaning I was giving to the groaning. It was the meaning I was applying to the sound. Now, your pebble may seem much bigger than a simple groan, right? I'm using a pretty benign kind of example. You may be having a lot of resistance right now to the idea that your relationship and everything that you have, the way that your relationship is because of the way you're thinking. Because that's ultimately what we're saying here, the meaning we're making out of things. You might really be resisting it, saying, yeah, a groan, not a big deal. My groan is an actual big deal. It's an actual problem. It's different than that. It's a bigger deal. That's okay if you're in that space right now. This is your primitive brain at work. It wants everything to remain the same. It wants to conserve energy, the habit, even if it's a painful one. Keeping the beliefs that you have right now, seeing the world the way that you see it right now, right, is a way of your primitive brain saying, let's just stay safe and just keep hiding in the cave here. Conserve the energy, just keep doing what we're doing. We don't want to change the way we think or look about things. We don't want the 10,000 foot view. That means I have to use more energy. Thought work is a process that we do our whole lives. We do it if we're paying attention or not. I react to my spouse having air come out of their body if I pay attention or not. I wanted to pay attention. I know there was something more that I desired for our relationship than the previous way, than the way we were being burned from it, the way I was being burned from it, from the meaning that I was making out of it. Now we're almost here. We're almost to the question that I wanted to give you at the end, right? The most important question that you could be asking yourself. The most important question that you can be asking yourself. The question that is needed to begin the process of letting go of the old way, not trying to replace it, not trying to force it. That brings up that resistance. We want to be in a place where we're letting go versus judging and pushing and trying. We need a softness space. The question to be able to see what was fueling my relationship was, what am I making it mean? The noise that was coming out, what was I making it mean? Back in episode number 1, we talked about relationships are our thoughts. Many of our thoughts, we believe, are facts, are truths. They are a stone in your shoe. The only truth is that a sound came out of my spouse. Everything else is 100% optional. So the question to ask yourself is, what are you making it mean? What is truly factual? And we'll get to what the facts are, and then what do you make it mean? This is what's creating your fuel. This is where the pain is coming from. This is something that you can change. This is something that you have autonomy over. You cannot make other adults do things or stop doing things. So sorry, spoiler here. I couldn't actually make my spouse groan or stop groaning. But what I could do is take the pebble out of my shoe. And the pebble is what I was making the sound mean. I have to use the tools of compassion to see what's making it mean, to question all of it, all of the meaning that I was making out of it. You are not your thoughts, but they are the cause of the results in your life. Be committed, be present, show up with curiosity and love for yourself and your spouse. Next week, we're going to talk about what it means to show up with love, how to show up with love. You are a gift. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can get every episode. And when you are ready to be in action, come find us. Facebook, Instagram, or our website. It's all the same name, relationshipsonfire.com. We've got that S on there. There's lots of us having relationships. So relationships with an S, onfire.com. Thanks so much. Saying goodbye, your fire and water gal, Cori Myka. See you next time.